rightly said that the circular economy gives an opportunity to build a system that can run in the long run, and the time is right for it to reach the large scale. A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to the first session of our webinar series organized by the Nisaq Foundation. I, Uwais Rahman, present my greetings to one and all present here. The series revolves around the central theme, which is circular economy, a solution to achieve carbon neutrality that seeks to maximize the effective use of natural capital and the retention of value throughout the goods' useful lives. It is also an important component when talking about the solution to our degrading environment. The series would have 5 different seminars focusing on 5 different sub-themes. It will focus the light on the shift of various world economies to a circular approach of economy, the rationale behind the shift, the significance of waste management to achieve the circular economy, the role play of preferences of consumers, and the government policies to achieve the circular economy. Among us today, we have experts, academicians, NGOs, and business owners that are working continuously to ensure the success of circular economy in India, along with the students and the members of the Nisaq Foundation team. Now, before I move forward, I would like to request our CEO and co-founder, Mr. Vikrant Srivastava, for a welcome address. Sir, please.
Thank you, Avesh, and thank you everybody, those who have been joining and writing to us with this most important session. A very good afternoon to everyone, and especially very good afternoon to Dr. Shruti. On behalf of the entire Nisarg Foundation, I want to thank you for taking out your time and speaking on the global transition from a linear to a circular economy. This is a subject in which we should all be deeply interested because of its importance to ensure there is enough food, water, and prosperity. I will not take much of your time, but I will be deeply interested to know what we and I could personally learn more from you. And we all be waiting from this day to learn something because you have been doing intensely for more than 20 years with your background. So floor is all yours, Uwesh, go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Now, moving forward, we all know that circular economy emphasizes on the 3 principles that are reduce, reuse, and recycling. Simply put, in the linear economy, resources are extracted, transformed into finished goods, and then discarded soon after the later has been served the purposes. But reusing and recycling everything, the cycles of these primary resources are closed in a circular economy. How value is produced and maintained, how manufacturing can be made more sustainable, and what kinds of businesses may thrive as a result of this shift. These are all the questions that we have to ponder and that we have to rethought to achieve the circular economy. Because the current take, manufacturer, and waste economic model has evidently far-reaching, and they also has a severe consequences for our environment. Together with decarbonization and a rapid transition to a more circular economy model, we have a chance to bring about a future with significantly reduced carbon emissions and environmental impacts, which would thus make our planet Earth a better place to live in. Our subtopics does have been carefully crafted to raise those key issues clouding our path towards circular economy and how to leverage the power of available resources in their truest sense for eradicating the traditional model of linear economy. This webinar aims to serve as a platform to bring together visionary leaders and create ideas that have a meaningful impact on our today's and tomorrow's. Now, without further ado, I would like to start our first webinar focusing on the sub-theme, Global Transition from Linear to Circular Economy. Our guest speaker for today's theme and webinar is Dr. Shruti Sharma Rana. She is a professor at Terry School of Advanced Studies, New Delhi. Her key areas consist of ESG frameworks and regulations, business sustainability, strategy, and circular economy. Dr. Shruti has a doctorate in business management and postgraduate in marketing and strategy management. She is a quality-oriented professional with 20 years of experience in academics, research, marketing, and sales. training and consulting educators and corporate for motivation, communication effectiveness, behavioral training, developing emotional quotient, and competency mapping. She also developed expertise in pedagogy skills development. Dr. Shruti has a proficiency in strategy for business sustainability, change management, blue ocean strategy, and marketing management practices. She has served in organizations like the Indian Express, the Hindustan Times Limited, and Group M in strategic planning, business development, alliance management, corporate communication, consulting across publishing, media, interactive media, and consulting domains. She is also associated with the Ministry of HRD as a resource person. Dr. Shruti volunteers as a mentor for Orion Shalini program. She trains and guides girls selected for scholarship by the government for the program. Dr. Shruti, I, on behalf of the entire NISAG team, welcomes you and also thank you for graciously accepting our invitation to be the guest speaker for this webinar. And with that, the virtual stage is all yours, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Oves. And thank you so much, NISAG Foundation, for giving me an opportunity to come and speak on the subtopic of circular economy. One subject which is very close to my heart. In fact, this is one of the solutions when we look at the problem of climate change. Circular economy is one of the most sought after, topic which comes in mind as a solution. So I would like to start the topic, and I welcome you all here. And thank you so much, Oves Nasar. Welcome all the participants. I would just like to say that during this 1 hour, when we would be talking about the global transition from linear to circular economy, if you have any questions, you may ask me. Let's make it very interactive. I think the learning, I believe that the learning has to be a two-way process. So wonderful. If you have some questions, if you have any suggestions, please, raise your hand, or you can just ask, just ask the question between between my presentation also. So let me start my presentation. Always, if you, I would like to share the screen. Yes. Please let me know if my screen is visible
Yes,
to you
ma'am.
all.
It's visible. Yes, ma'am, it is.
Thank you. So the topic which I would be talking on, and I would love to open the session, is global transition from linear to circular economy. And we keep on hearing things about, when we look at circularity, and there's a lot of talks which is going around about circular businesses practices. So, what is the need when we say that? What is the need, and why do we need, circular business practices to build a context of, the transition which we are seeing today from linear to circular? I would, like to quote Albert Einstein here, and he, long time back, very famously quoted that we cannot solve our problems by using the same thinking we used when we created them. So if we look at the problems which all of us are facing today, the problems which is of climate change, you look at problems where we talk about problems such as, disparate inequality, where you look at problems which are different kind of problems which have arisen due to technology. Now, these are the problems which have been created, which was created, I mean, post when we look at it, I mean, these are problems which are very complex in nature. And we say that these are wicked problems. So these wicked problems are the problems which we don't have a solution. This is the solution. I mean, the problems are known as wicked problems. So we cannot rely on the thinking, thinking which we used when we created the problem. When you see, I mean, post-industrial, post-World War II, when the industrialization started, and it said that, it is responsible for the crisis, for the climate crisis, which we are today. Industrialization, it spoke about I remember when we used to read economics. When I read economics, it said air and water is free. Rest everything comes with a cost. So that was a thinking when we, that's a thinking by which we've read, and that's how industries have been using, resources. But then we need to change our thinking if we need to solve the wicked problem. The current world which we are living in is termed as a VUCA world. And when we talk about VUCA, what is VUCA? Now, this was a term which was first used by George W. Bush in the Afghanistan war in 1991, and which he termed the world as currently that kind of world as volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. Now, it said that, the world which is there, which is a VUCA world, which is very volatile, which is very ambiguous, very complex, and, there is no defined, there's no predictability, there is no definite, answer to any question which we have. That's a VUCA world. And if you see in and around the kind of business environment, the kind of market environment, the kind of environment which we are today, our ecosystem is a VUCA ecosystem where it's very ambiguous, very unpredictable. We as species, we as business organizations, we as individuals are very vulnerable now. You've seen what COVID has did to us. A virus, it disrupted our lives completely. It brought the world to a standstill for 2 years. Still, it's something which is ongoing, and they say that, these kind of events, when which we term as black swan events, would actually be a part of, our day-to-day life. So unpredictability is there, a lot of volatility is there. There's no defined, solution. There's no definite way. There's no algorithm where we can find our solutions to all the problems. So that's the VUCA world we are living in today. And the problems which are facing in this VUCA world are known as complex problems. Now, when we look at complex challenges and complicated challenges, now what is a complicated challenge and what is a complex challenge? Now, when we look at complicated challenge is a challenge where you have a solution to it, a challenge where there's a process to solve the problem. There is, if you do these 10, there is an algorithm to it. If you follow it, you're going to find solutions to the problem. That's complicated problem, and that's easy to solve. Maybe there is technology solves the complicated problems. But when you look at the problems which have, which are there today, which when we say that I've told all the problems which talked about inequality, where I spoke about problems rising due to climate change, when we look at geopolitics in and around us, now these are all problems which are very complex problems. And when we look at complex problems, we don't have a solution to it. We don't have an expertise. We have, the context is very unstable. So there's no clear path which is visible to us. So these kind of challenges are known as complex challenges. So what do we do to solve this? How do we solve it? And that's where when we look at as one of the solution which comes to our mind is circularity. One of the solution which comes to our mind, a broader way forward is sustainability. When we look at sustainability. Now, there's a lot of research which has happened in this field that how do we come up with complex problems? And the only thinking which has been, as a solution provider is known as a thinking which is known as systems thinking approach. Now, when we say systems thinking, what is systems thinking? Now, systems thinking is a thinking and approach where the outcome matters more than the sum of the parts. That's what systems thinking is about. It says that you look at an entity as a system, not as an individual parts. And they say when you look at an entity as a system and not as a part, and that's where you start moving forward, or that's where you start finding solutions to the problem. So when we look at, and there's a lot of interdynamics involved, there's a lot of interdependencies, there is a lot of synergies between parts there, and that's how you look at and you find solutions. So when you look at the complex problems, the problems which are currently all of us globally, we are facing the problems, the solution to it comes by an approach which is known as a systems thinking approach. And when we look at it from a systems thinking approach, it says that environment and society is where we live in, and development is what we do in order to survive. Unless and until our actions are aligned with the environment and society, we are a subsidiary of environment and society and not the other way around. So unless and until whatever we do, whatever the businesses practices we do, or the way we function, it is aligned to the environment and society, then only it would be viable. So it becomes a good business case. So that is why when you hear a lot of talk, when we discuss triple bottom line, we talk about people, planet, and profit. We talk about, solving, we talk about business sustainability, we talk about solving wicked problems. Wicked problems is where you don't have a solution to a problem, where, business sustainability, business and consumerism. When we say sustainability and consumerism, it's said that they don't go hand in hand. And the more you try to solve it, the more, the situation gets from bad to worse. So these kind of problems, which are known as wicked problems or complex problems, and the approach which is being said is the way forward, or the solution is the systems thinking approach, which says that, again, I repeated that, economy is a subsidiary of environment and society, and not the other way around. So unless and until all your actions are aligned to environment and society, it would not be economically viable. So when we look at it, when we look at it from the perspective of businesses currently, the businesses post World War II have not been aligned to the environment and society. I mentioned few minutes ago that the problems when the problems were created, air and water were supposed to be. We used to consider, businesses used to consider that air and water were free, and rest everything comes with a cost. And now you look at where water is a commodity which is listed in the stock exchange. Water, a bottle of water and a bottle of Coke, water of water is costlier than a bottle of Coke. One random gesture of Ronaldo, where he actually substituted the bottle of Coke with a bottle of water, led to led to the equity fall in the Coca-Cola. So businesses, in order to survive, they need to realize that they need to work in tandem with environment and society in order to survive and thrive. And that's where system thinkings come into play. Now, system thinking talks about sustainability. We say that, system thinking is a holistic approach which talks about, a lot of interdependencies, a lot of synergies between the components and the parts. When we look at it from an environment and society perspective, that development is what does we do, and environment and society is where we live in. When we look at it, sustainability, it comes as a solution provider to it, and is a approach which is based on the systems thinking approach. Now, what does sustainability mean? Now, all of us know that sustainability was a term whose definition was coined by United Nations Brundtland Commission in 1987, which said that, what is sustainability? It says, meeting the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It means live and let live. It means taking care of the future. It means thriving in perpetuity. This is what sustainability as a concept means, which is based on the system thinking approach, and which comes as a solution to the current complex and wicked problems which we are facing. Now, why is there a need for business sustainability when we talk about sustainability of the businesses? There are a few points where we need to ponder before I move to the concept of circular economy. Now, first is the longevity of businesses. So there was a report in 2019 by McKinsey. And McKinsey said that the lifespan of a Fortune 500 companies in 1920, which was 100 years ago, was 80 years, 80 years. And in 2018, when McKinsey did about the lifespan of the few Fortune 500 companies, it says that from 80 years, it shrunk to 18 years, 18 years. So most of the Fortune 500 companies would not, 75% going by, what McKinsey did, the research which they did, most of the companies, 75% of Fortune 500 companies would not be there in 2030. So that's a question of the survivability now. It's a question of the two S which we say when we look at today's businesses about survivability and sustainability. So longevity of the business is here at stake. The lifespan of the business is here at stake. That's one of the reasons, one of the most important reasons where, we look at sustainability or business sustainability. Second, I think we have all realized, during COVID time, this was one thing which was, which was brought and into attention, and still there. You look at Russia, Ukraine crisis, you look at the volatility of energy prices, volatility of raw material prices. You look, and I think the reason to blame on, apart from the geopolitics, is the rising population. So when I say the concern is climate change, when I say the concern is inequality, the concern is rising population. Now, we as an earth, we as an ecosystem, earth is not equipped, to actually 10 to 9 billion people by 2040. That is what is the figures are. So when you talk about, limited resources, rising population, which is again a big concern, and it has an impact on everything. So rising population, which due to which, when you look at currently also, if you look at it, there have been a lot of volatility in raw material prices. There have been supply chain disruptions. There have been a lot of issues which businesses are facing currently. So it becomes very difficult and it becomes very challenging for them to hold their grounds in these difficult situations. There have been supply chain disruptions throughout. Companies have been worried about the scope 3 emissions, which they are still not able to get a hold of it or control of it. So that's the second largest concern, which is volatility in terms of raw material, in terms of energy prices, and the reasons to be blamed is rising population, is geopolitics, is climate change, and other factors as well. Increase in environmental regulations. If you look at businesses right now, every government across the globe, if you look at it from an Indian landscape perspective, Indian government too has tightened its noose across around businesses. The government regulations, the compliances which the businesses have to do. They have to transition towards, when you look at it from towards the sustainable businesses practices or ESG business practices, where the environmental regulations have never been more stringent. So there again, it's a challenge for the businesses. There's a transitional risk which is associated with the business in terms of environmental regulations for the businesses to follow. Look at the way what SEBI has done. It has made BRSR mandatory for the top 1,000 listed companies. And the same it is going to follow, I mean, maybe in 6 months or maybe a year's time with the other set of businesses. So everybody would be a part of it. So when you cannot, as a business, if you're a business entity and you're practicing, in Indian landscape, you cannot escape environmental regulations. And anything, a shift towards environmental regulations comes with a cost. So increasing environmental regulation becomes a challenge for the businesses to align themselves towards, or compliance becomes important and challenging. Now, the fourth point, and again, one of a very important point, is basically a trust deficit. There's been stakeholder pressures from stakeholders for the businesses to follow the sustainability path, or for pressure from stakeholders towards businesses to look at the ethical practices, to look at compliance, to take care of the community in which you operate in, to take care of the environment, to take care of your carbon footprint in which you operate to. So the process has become very important now. Unlike the Milton Friedman approach, which talked about the shareholder theory, where the only business of the business is business only, or the only responsibility a business has is towards its shareholder. So there is somebody who has invested in your business. So your only responsibility is to give him an ROI, to give him a return. It is now the stakeholders have become very important. So from the Friedman approach, we've moved to an Edward Friedman approach, which talks about stakeholders. So stakeholders they've become a very important part of the businesses. And businesses, in order to survive, thrive, in order to maintain a continuity, or in order to, for the survivability, they have to take care of the stakeholders' need and demand. And the stakeholders have become very conscious nowadays. So when we look at stakeholders, if they are your employees, they are your, the community in which you operate to, the government becomes your stakeholder, the suppliers, the dealer network, your employees, your customers, everything becomes a part of your stakeholders. So there has been a trust deficit, by the kind of practices which businesses do, which have been quite unethical, the kind of greenwashing which has been happening. So that trust deficit, that stakeholder pressure has been there, and businesses are feeling this need to move from the regular traditional practices. There's a push from the stakeholders to follow certain kind of sustainable practices, or practices which are ethical or clean. So the trust deficit becomes an important part. Competitive forces. There are a lot of competitive forces in and around. So in a company, in order to survive, if the competitors are doing something, so you also need to move ahead with it. So if PepsiCo decides to do something, Coca-Cola also has to follow if they have to operate in the marketing environment or the business environment. So companies are wanting to take that first mover advantage towards sustainability. And the last thing, when we say that, why is there a need for business sustainability? So as I mentioned, there is a pressure from the stakeholders, and there has been transparency issues. Now, a lot of things when we look at from the government side, from the stakeholder side, now the businesses are forced to make disclosures. Earlier, the disclosures, still, if we look at it from the global scenario, we don't have any ESG standard. We have a lot of frameworks, not one standard. There are different kind of standards and frameworks, but not a global standard. So there's a lot of work which is going on in COP26. There was an initiative which was taken by GRI, by SASB, by CDP, by IIRC to come up with a global ESG, disclosure standard, which every companies can align to. From an Indian landscape, our government has acted proactively and they've come up with a BRSR, which is one kind of a disclosure framework, which every companies have to, talk about it. What are the disclosures as far as the environmental, social, governance issues, the economic front? They have to mention all of that. So there have been a transparency issues from the company, and that is where we say that there's a lot of been, in terms of greenwashing, in terms of unethical issues which have been practicing. But now government is forcing the companies to be transparent. The stakeholders are forcing the companies to be transparent, and the companies themselves, in order to gain a brand equity, are looking at transparencies and disclosures. I, in fact, have talked about it a lot that, transparency leads to trust leads to loyalty, and loyalty in turn leads to brand equity. And when we look at it from the equity perspective, equity is a non-financial asset which has the maximum financial impact on a company's or in a business health. So transparency becomes very important. So all of these things have led businesses to look towards, business in, the, the theme of sustainability. The businesses, in order to be sustainable, have to look at business sustainability. And they say that business sustainability is the only way forward if you want to survive and if you want to solve the complex problem or the wicked problem which all of the businesses or all of us are facing right now. So that's the need of business sustainability. Now the need is there, the context is there, and I think all of you may ask that, since it's a complex problem, we don't have a defined solution. So what should be the strategy towards it? What kind of systems thinking, when you look at the systems thinking approach, what should we follow? So the following, when we look at, the applicability part of it or the strategy part of it, we look at one system which has been surviving forever, which is our ecosystem. So when you look at nature, you get, there's a lot of things which you can learn from the nature's way. Now, when we talk about the circular economy, all the tenets of circular economy, the foundation of circular economy has been the natural ecosystem. Look at nature. Now, when you look at nature, the nature does not have waste. It's completely transparent. There's no waste in nature. I hope all of you agree with me. Nature believes in the concept of zero waste. Waste of one species would be, maybe used by others. So we all die, we degenerate, we go to the soil. Soil, again, the plants, through that soil, the plants are there, the fruits which we eat. So it's very circular in nature. So when you look at it from a circular business practices or circular economy practices, we look at the system, which is ecosystem, again, a system thinking approach, where the outcome is more important than the parts. So in fact, a lot of times last year, I addressed one conference, which was Save Earth. We have a day where we call it as an Earth Day. And we had a campaign, which is Saving the Earth campaign, where we look at different what kind of strategies we look forward to tackle climate change. I say that, the Earth will save itself. We don't need to worry about Earth. The only thing which we need to worry about is us as a species. If we are not aligned, again, the system thinking approach, if we are not aligned with the environment and society in which we are operating and we go against, which we have been going against for past 60, 70 years, the nature has its way of throwing us out of the system. There were a lot of species which became extinct, which were not aligned or which lost its utility towards the ecosystem, again, the system. So the nature had its own way of, weeding them out of the system. So the only reason to survive or to be aligned with the system or is following a system thinking approach, look at nature, the way the nature works and the way the nature functions. So when we look at our circular practices, we derive it from the nature, or we look at the nature's way. Now I'll play a video. Please let me know whether it is audible or not. Now this video, it's self-explanatory that how does nature, practice circularity. And when we talk about circularity, circularity is nothing but it is all, restorative and regenerative. All your systems and processes, they have to be restorative and regenerative in nature, the way nature functions. So we'll have a quick look at the video and then we'll continue with the lecture. If you have any questions, anything, or please feel free to ask me now. Any suggestions, any questions, any comments? Okay, fine. So I'll just play the video. Let me know if it's audible. So this, I think all of you would have seen the video, and it is a video which we talk about the nature's way of sustainability. How is nature, our ecosystem? How does it keep itself sustainable? How does it survive for years? So when you look at nature, as I mentioned, it believes in the concept of systems thinking or circularity. So circularity, or when we look at circular business practices, this is also based on the same thinking of systems thinking approach, where you look at, your when you look at anything, your business as a system. Now, what is circularity? Now, when you look at it currently, when we look at linear approach, linear is take, make, and waste. The one which businesses have been following it for, I think, that's the way we've been all practicing. Where we have, you take the resources from the environment, you have process it and make input, process, and output. This is what we have studied also. So take, make, and waste is what we all, we have been practicing, we've been following, all our production systems have been following. So that is a concept which is known as linearity. And linearity talks about waste. And waste, what exactly is waste? Waste is something where some resource which is not being utilized properly converts into waste. Now, when we look at circularity as a concept, which is again restorative and regenerative in nature, and we talk about, circular, putting that waste, reducing the waste. We talk about resource efficiency here. Resource efficiency talks about, how do you maximum optimization of resources? It talks about how can you, capitalize or optimize this use of resources, resource efficiency. How can you minimize the waste? How can you design your processes and systems so effectively that there is no waste which is generated in the system? Or if there is some waste which is generated by the process, how can you put that again into loop? So that is what circularity as a concept talks about. Circularity as a concept talks about reducing the waste. It talks about restoring. It talks about regeneration. It talks about closing the loop. So from a take, make, waste economy, which was very linear, and we see the repercussions which we all have been seeing about the linear approach. We go to a next form of economy, which is known as a circular economy, which is restorative and regenerative in nature. And it talks about closing the loop. It talks about it talks about, zero waste is what it talks about, waste management. So this is what circularity, a circular economy is all about. So from a waste, we go to a zero waste. We talk about closed loop. We look at the systems thinking approach. This is one concept which has come across as a solution to the problems which we are facing today. Now, when we go back, when we talk about circular economy, before circular economy, we need to know that what is economy. So I'll just show you, it's a small video, and then we'll go to circular economy. So I think you've got the basic thing that linear is take, make, and waste, and circular is about closing the loop, about, zero waste, and how do you close that loop and put that waste again back into the system so that it's utilized properly. Something what nature does, restorative and regenerative. So before moving on to circular economy, just a
Sorry,
video.
sorry to interrupt you. So the
Yes.
audio for last video was not audible. So I'm not sure whether this video will also be audible to us or not. So
Oh,
if you
but
could
why
just,
didn't you? Okay.
no, but they
I,
had the subtitles, so we were okay with that. But if you could
oh,
just
okay,
kindly
you should
explain,
have
yeah,
interrupted. Yeah. So
no
let
issues,
me
man.
know. Please
Yeah,
interrupt if you can't hear the audio, and we'll go to the other slide. So that's
yeah,
not important. Let me know
thank
if you
you.
can hear. I've played it right now.
No, I too cannot hear. I'm sure
You
others
can't hear,
also.
ma'am.
Can't hear? Okay, no
Yeah.
one. So then but were you all able to see that video? I mean, I wanted all of you to see the video, but with the subtitles, subtitles, I'm sure it would have not been of any help. You would
No,
have
ma'am,
interrupted.
we got the lesson of that video. I'm sure
But
everybody
maybe you
does.
would have got a gist
Yeah,
of it. Yeah, would please
yeah,
interrupt me if there's some kind of, a technical glitch comes in.
sure.
So yes, coming back, going back to circular economy, what is defined? If we look at the definition of circular economy, there's a diagram here. It talks about reducing material and energy consumption and waste through recycling. You use recycling, reusing, refurbishing. So combining economic and environmental gains. So this is one thing where where what circular economy is all about. So again, as I said, waste management, I talked about, resource efficiency. These become the two important pillars of circular economy, that you reduce your material and energy usage. So when you talk about material, material in terms of resources which you use. So we look at it from, economies of scale. We talk about when we look at circularity as a practice or circular economy as a practice. Energy usage which goes there, reducing your material and energy usage and waste, through recycling, reuse, and you combine your economic and environmental. And when you look at it from an environmental gain perspective, you reduce your carbon footprint. This is what circularity talks about. When you look at it from economic perspective, it talks about economic viability. It talks about profits. Efficiency leads to profits. So if you're reducing your material and energy, obviously it would lead to your profitability. So economic viability and environmental gains are tremendous when we look at circular business practices. How do you do it? You reduce by reducing your material, energy, and waste through recycling, reuse. So this is in a nutshell definition of circular economy. Now, if we look at circular economy again, there are three principles, which when circular economy is based on broadly these three principles. I've already mentioned in my nature's video, and I've spoken about it during my context settings that, again, in linear, we take our resources from the earth, which is a take, make, waste, and how we generate waste, which is linear. We don't look at the efficiency part here. But, when we look at it, circular economy, we do these three things. The first thing, these three are the principles of circular economy. The first is eliminate waste and pollution. Second is circulation of products and material. And third is regenerate nature. So very important, regenerating nature, restorative and regenerating. So when we say that all the ingredients, you give it back to the nature. So whatever you've taken from the nature, you give it back to the nature. That is, and you regenerate the nature. So which our other philosophies have failed to address, circular economy addresses. So it talks about waste and pollution. It talks about circularity of products. And the third and very important thing, which most of us miss during our discussions, is it regenerates nature. That's very important thing which circular practices talks about. So how do you do that? So we'll talk about all these things in detail. So when you look at the first principle where you eliminate, waste and pollution. So you eliminate it through, do you design out? When I use the term eliminate, and here I'm talking about designing out waste and pollution. So when I say designing out, anyone, what does designing out means? Designing out waste and pollution. Anybody can just. So, okay, then so designing out means when you design, when you conceptualize the product, or, it is not a tactical or an end game, once you've already designed the product. So cradle to grave approach, you would have heard. Now, when you look at cradle to grave, it is not circular, but when cradle to cradle approach is what we talk about, there is where circularity comes in place. So when we talk about designing out waste and pollution, designing out waste and pollution means when you conceptualize the product and the time you start designing the product, any product you start designing, you design out the waste out of it. So that you see the cradle to cradle, the end usage, the way consumer uses the product, the way the consumer disposes the product. Post disposal, you check that, what kind of things will go into waste and whether you can put it back again in the system. The cascade effect. So you design out waste and pollution. So whenever designing, that is where one thing which is one of the first principle that during you start from the design part. So circular, all the negative impacts which the product has, you design it out. For example, if there is a company which uses fossil fuels, one of a fossil fuel as a raw material, the where if we look at circularity, that would be the first thing it would talk about, that how do you design out the usage of fossil fuel? How do you design out that minimum energy would be, less energy would be used, or renewable energy would be used? How do you design out that the waste would go back into the system, waste would be taken back into the system? How do you design out the regeneration? So this is how do you design out that, the greenhouse gas emission would be less. There would be no hazardous gas, or when we look at it from the sulfuric side, or a nitrous oxide would not be, a part of the process, or would not be emitted. So you take care of all of these things when you design your product. So that's the first step when we look at circular economy, that you design out waste and pollution right from the time the idea of the product is conceptualized. There are many products, which are based on this. The products which are based on the concept of circular economy are the ones which are designed to reduce the negative impact, or the negative externalities are not there. Second, the most important principle is you keep the products and material in use. So when you look at it, when you look at it first, the first point which you take is you design out waste. And the way you design the product, you see that the waste and pollution are designed out. The negative externalities are designed out. There's nothing harmful. Your economic viability and the environmental benefits are being taken care of. The second, which important thing when in circular economy is you keep the products and material in use. So there's no waste which comes out in the process. Whatever comes out, it is again taken back into loop. So products and material are always in use. So if we to look at from a circular practices, when we look at a cradle to cradle approach, and it says let's say a plastic bottle, a PET bottle, unless and until I mean, when if it is circularity, if the products and material which you use have to be again got back into the system, have to be used again, the quality has to be restored. So if the PET bottle packaging, if after recycling it, you cannot make a plastic bottle out of it. You either put make something else out of it, so it's not something else which may go so you as a waste. So if this happens, that means it is not circular in nature. So if it again comes back, it goes into the system, makes something other and goes back to the nature. That is where when we look at that is where we say that it's circular. So products and materials, whatever you use, even if you're using a water, while making the product, you'll see that the water is restored back, the amount of water. So when companies like Coca-Cola talk about water neutrality, for every drop of water, they give another a drop of water is given back to the system. It is not. It is pure greenwashing. If you're drying up the groundwater, you cannot, give groundwater back to the system or back to the ecosystem. So these are all greenwashing things. But if it is circular, what everything, your products and material would always be in use. So this is what the second principle is. And the third is regenerating natural systems. I mean, when you look at regeneration, it says the use of non-renewable resources. You only use non-renewable energy. Whatever you use, whatever the waste, it goes back into the soil. It goes back to the soil. If and it is completely, it is there's nothing which goes as a waste. And it is renewable or it's used as opposed to relying on fossil fuel. So that is where how you regenerate natural systems. So the three basic principles when we look at circular design, these are the three basic principles. First is you design out waste and pollution, very important. Second is you see that the products and materials are always in the use of system. And third is you degenerate nature, that whatever the waste or whatever the process is, you see that everything is circular, everything goes back to the nature, everything is absorbed or soaked in by the mother nature. There's nothing which goes out as a carbon footprint. It's completely, when we look at it from a carbon neutrality perspective, when we look at a net zero perspective, this is what the solution is. When you look at it, this is where the circularity comes into place. And yes, the topic I saw one of the topic, circular economy as a solution to carbon neutrality. Yes, this is the only solution to carbon neutrality, because there's no, you talk about zero carbon footprint, the off carbon offsets which you create, the sequestration which you do, you regenerate the natural system. So the three things, which are essentially the circularity or a circular economy is based on these three very important principles of, designing out waste and pollution, regeneration of natural ecosystem. And the second one was keeping the products and material in loop. Now, how do you follow it? What is the applicability part of it? Or what is the model which we follow when we talk about the circular design? Now, there is a model which is known as a butterfly model. And this is the framework or tool which we as businesses, we use. Now, what is this butterfly design? Butterfly design has two parts. One is the biological material flow and second is the technical material flow. Biological material part, I'll show you the diagram after the slide. Now, biological material talks about, every process, you use some biological material and you use some technical material. Now, the biological material can be the ones which are biodegradable materials, right? The one which can be absorbed by the nature or which can go back to the nature. And there are certain materials which are technical materials. Technical materials as plastics, such as chemicals, which are non-biodegradable materials. Now, these are the materials become a part of the technical material flow, and the ones which can be taken by the environment or can be absorbed by the environment are known as biological materials. So this butterfly design, this is the framework which is, I mean, this is the framework which has come by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is working majorly, which is in the circular economy. And this is a beautiful design which has come for the circular business practices, the butterfly design. So if you see this design, there is, it talks about a model that how do businesses practice circularity. So there is one thing in blue which you see. Now this blue is a technical material flow. And the one in green, which you see, it's a biological material flow framework. And when you see that how do they put these all, how do you amalgamate the biological material flow and the technical material flow and use it and close the loop. Now, if you see, let's come back to technical material flow here. Now, it says the first concept which technical material flow says, the first is maintain and prolong. That's the first step. And maintain and prolong means that whatever your product is, whatever the product which you come, now you design it out in such a way that, you can use it for the longest period of time. You can maintain it and you can prolong it. So if you can use it for the maximum possible time, so the timeline has to be extended. So you have to ensure that the product which you make is of excellent quality, so that it does not deteriorate or it does not, the quality has to be taken care of. So the product which has come, the product which you've made has to be, the first rule is to maintain and prolong. After you've maintained and prolonged it for the longest possible time, you've used the product, then comes the second part is where you reuse and redistribute it to the system. And when I say reuse and redistribute it to the system, it can say that, for example, if you have any example we can take is that if you have, say, a carpet, let's say we have a carpet, and you can maintain and prolong it for the longest period of time. How do you reuse it, and redistribute it? You can change the way, you can put it on an incinerator, you can use it to maybe a stuff your cushion, or you can use it, by stuffing, making your mattresses with it. So reuse and redistribute. So the same product you maintain and prolong for a longest time, then you redistribute and reuse it. So you change the way, you don't change, you just use that product in some other form that you redistribute in the nature. And once you have, I'm sorry, I think the slides have changed. So once you redistribute and reuse it, I've put it, then is the second time where you look at it refurbishing and remanufacture. That once the use have completely gone down, like you've used the carpet in some other form, in some other way, then is the last thing where you refurbish and remanufacture. So maybe, you create some kind of, from that thing, you create some kind of pellets which can go in converting of some kind of a material. Maybe you create a t-shirt out of it, or maybe you create some kind of, you see a lot of innovation, environmental innovations are there, technological innovations we come across, on a day-to-day basis, where we see that how do we remanufacture the same product. So third is where you talk about refurbish and remanufacture, and then you recycle the material again. So this is again closing the loop: maintain, prolong, reuse, redistribute, refurbish, remanufacture, and last is you recycle. So these are the four steps when we look at the technical flow of the process in circularity. This is what we do for technical flows. That means the material which are non-biodegradable material. So we look at it from a technical flow perspective, so that how from the longest period of time you can use the material and energy. Then comes the biological flow. So if in a product, say you have something which is biodegradable, now what do? You look for a cascading effect. And when we look at cascading, what do we understand by cascading? Cascading is nothing but reusing it again and again. So if suppose, how can you reuse a particular product, again and again? How can you say, maybe, there are flowers, there's something flower. Then again, you go for a cascading effect. You dry up the flower, maybe create a color out of it, so again, cascading effect. How can you do that? Once you've done that cascading thing, and you have the product, the byproduct which is being left, you can use it for an anaerobic digestion. You can create a biogas out of it. You can put it again, regenerating the biosphere. If not, then you can extraction of biochemical feedstock. You can do that. You can extract all of that. You can use that for farming and collection. So there is, again, if you look at the diagram of butterfly, there are two parts of it. One is a biological material flow. Second is a technical material flow. And this is how we use circularity in our date in the system, the circularity. So when you look at it from a circular business practices, when you look at all these things from a circular business practices, this is how we practice it. So it is based on the three designs where you design out waste and pollution. You keep you keep the products and material already in the loop, which I've showed it to you through the butterfly diagram. And the third part and the most important part is you regenerate the nature. You do it by following the butterfly diagram, which by biological material flows and technical material flows. So that was the framework of circular business practices. And this framework is applicable to different industries, different sectors. They have customized it according to their material flows, their requirement, but this butterfly diagram remains the same. Now, when we look at it, where there's one very important thing where there's this, if you can see the slide, access versus ownership. Now, when you look at it from a circular economy point of view, they say that, we as customers have to be very conscious, that there is a difference between, the ones which can be consumed and one can be used. So consumables and the products which can be used or the material which can be used. The circular economy clearly differentiates between these two, the ones which can be consumed and used. Consumables are the ones which they are the biological material like food. They're consumables. We eat them, we consume them. And there are certain things which are used by us. Say, for example, a drilling machine. So why do you use a drilling machine? Your drilling machine to make holes in the wall. Maybe do you want to hang a painting? So drilling can be, the machine is just you're using that machine to make drills. So that machine can be used as service. So again, I mean, there's a shortage of time, but there are business models which are there. So when we look at it from the circularity perspective, we always look at every product from a consumable or a usable perspective. So consumable are the ones which can go back to the system, the material, and we directly use them. And usable are directly consume them. I'm sorry. Unusable are the material which actually are the ones which, you use it. So if there is lights, you use those bulbs and lights, they're the lighting equipments for you. So you get light out of it. So you can use it as a service. Drilling machine can come as a service. So there are a lot of business models which are working on this domain. There is a field known as collaborative consumerism, which has come. Again, a different subject. So it's a very vast subject. Positive scarcity of time, just, basically taking you through various points. So access versus ownership becomes very important in circularity. You view things from the two perspectives. One is usable, second is consumables. Consumables are the ones which a consumer directly uses it, the direct use of products, and biological material come in consumable, and technical material, which are non-biodegradable, generally are considered as the used material. So again, business models are worked in this domain. There are a lot of opportunities which are there when you look at it from a circular perspective. I think I've spoken about it a lot. The first is the economic benefits. There are a lot of economic benefits which comes when we look at it from the circular practices. Now, there's certain low-hanging fruits which we come. The first thing, as I mentioned, at the moment you design out waste and pollution, the moment you start working on energy efficiency and resource efficiency, the moment you talk about, reducing of waste, the first thing which is generated is your bottom line. Your bottom line gets, your bottom line it becomes profitable. That means the low hanging fruits, the profits start coming in. The basic thing as waste management, just don't do anything, just start managing your waste well, which leads to, again, that waste management also saves companies a lot of money. So economic benefits, a lot of economic benefits are associated with it. The use of virgin resources, resource inputs, they have virgin resources. If you use virgin resources, the ones extracted resources, again, the ones which have been extracted from a product. So if there is a mobile phone, and mobile phone, once you disintegrate the mobile phone and you extract something and reuse it, to make another phone. So that is known as the virgin resource inputs. So when you use that, your carbon footprint goes down, your costs of the goes down, and the total cost of the product goes down. So you're putting that again back into the loop. So this is when we look at its circularity, it has a lot of economic benefits to it, a lot of low-hanging fruits associated with it. Yes, tremendous environmental and system-wide benefits, potential benefits of companies shifting from linear approach to a circular approach, efficiencies being created, carbon footprint gets reduced because now you're designing out waste and pollution, you're keeping the products and materials in use, you're maintaining and prolonging them as long as possible. You're recycling, refurbishing, remanufacturing it. So one product you're seeing that the use goes on for the longest period of time. So definitely you're taking care of environment and system-wide benefits are being followed. You know, your target, your climate target is being maintained. Your climate impact is being reduced by following circular practices. For business, it is tremendously beneficial because yes, it has economic viability, it reduces the cost. You come across as a company which is clean, which complies with the stakeholders, which you have a compliance leadership. So there's a strategy known as beyond compliance leadership, which is there. So companies who follow circular approach come as a company which complies, to the government, to all the rules and regulations. You enjoy that credibility with financial investors. You see the kind of impact investing, social responsible investing, ESG investing, the domain which is growing. And this is for the businesses who are following these practices, who take care of the energy efficiencies, take care of the waste, take care of the environmental pollution, lower the carbon footprint, lower the impact on the climate. Now, these kind of businesses becomes as a very good business case for these. Apart from the bottom line, the top line grows as well. So the bottom line grows tremendously because of the low hanging fruits. When we look at it from an efficiency perspective, the top line also grows because of, again, the disclosures, the transparencies, compliance. So you achieve a beyond compliance leadership, very beneficial for the businesses. So shifting from linear to circular requires system solution. So it's beneficial for the businesses, it's beneficial for the individuals, it's beneficial for the environment, it's beneficial for the economy. So circularity, when you look at circular solution, has to be a clear shift. And most of the businesses, they have started moving from the linear to the circular approach. You look at companies every day announcing the target, every day talking about how do they talk about circularity. You look at Decathlon, what Decathlon has done, I think it's been everywhere in the news. And they've suddenly started talking about reverse logistics. They've started talking about circularity. And what they have done in that, they've reversed the name in three countries. So Decathlon spelled reverse. So that is where they said that this is for circularity they've given. So they have changed, reversed their name. Again, going to the reverse flow of material back to the system. Big this concept of circularity. So a lot of companies are coming, making announcements, talking about it. So everybody is shifting from a linear to a circular approach. And again, as I've mentioned, shifting of it or following a butterfly model, following the basic principles of circularity, it requires a systemic solution. It requires a system thinking approach. It requires to look at interdependencies. It has to look at collaborations. It has to look at a lot of synergies, a lot of symbiotic relationships between different kind of partners have to be come in if we have to shift from linear to circular approach. So this is where when you look at certain tenets of circularity and execution, this is one of the last slides, and if I started showing, I said that nature is an ecosystem, and it is one which follows circularity to its core. So what does nature do? So these are certain things, 10 things which nature practices, for circularity. And these are the things, nuggets which have been taken from, we have taken from nature, that how does nature practice circularity. Now these are the 10 points on which our tenets, or this become our tenets of circularity and execution. Nature believes in diversifying. So nature, you see Amazon rainforest, there's so much of diversity there. So a lot of diversity in nature is there. So businesses, you have to have a lot of raw material of waste of one can be a raw material for another. Lot of products, lot of portfolios, lot of diversity. Adaptation, one of the biggest thing which a nature does, it adapts and specializes to changing environment. Frogs, it's like they have lungs and they have, gills also. They can, breathe in on land and breathe in water as well. So nature, what did they do? I mean, there was a frog species of frog which was in Australia. It was found last year, which have didn't have lungs. So nature adopted. Lungs became redundant. So it was taken out by the nature. So nature has its own way of adapting and specializing. It celebrates transparency. So predator and prey. Everybody knows who's going to eat what. So nature always celebrates transparency. It executes systematically and not compartmentally. Systems thinking approach is there, where it looks at every from the outcome is more important than the sum of the parts. So if you are not aligned, nature would not take any time to weed you out of the system. That is how nature executes. There are big groups which protect the young. If you see the herd of elephants walking, the big elephants always walk, around, and the smaller ones which are protected. Nature always believes that. Nature integrates metrics, it always does. It improves with every cycle. It right sizes regularly. As I've said, right sizing becomes important. So if there's something which is of use, it would incorporate it, it would adapt it. If it is something which is not usable, it would right sizes. It fosters longevity and not immediate gratification. Again, the rule of sustainability, not looking at profitability, whereas in looking at it from the sustainable perspective. No immediate gratification, but sustainability. How can you survive and thrive for the longest period of time? Again, the last principle and the most important principle of circularity, which nature practices: waste nothing, recycle everything, and borrow nothing. So this is what the nature talks about. And this is where, we have incorporated all of this, as when you look at it from a circularity approach. And I would end my actually session by using this quote, which I feel that, it is for all of us, we all are stakeholders. Uh, all of us are. So, if, and we are very mindful, we as a generation are very mindful. So unless and until we start questioning, the system, and everybody needs to have an opinion, everybody needs to question the way the companies, the businesses, or the economy, or the government practices. It says that once you understand there's a destruction taking place, and you have to do something to change it. If you don't do something to take change, and though you're not part of it, you become you become a part of the strategy of tragedy. So you have to be in the strategy of change. You have to be alert, you have to be aware, you have to be mindful, you have to question, rather than being quiet and being part of a strategy for tragedy. So yeah, that would be all, and that's how I would end my lecture. And yes, open to questions and comments.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful, informative, and it was such a informative session for all of us. You not only talked about how the world is changing towards circular economy, but you also talked about why it is important. You in fact started with the whys. You in fact gave us the pre-context, because it is very important, especially if we are to convince someone why one should change their thinking, change their mentality towards circular economy. So it's very important that we explain them why it is important. So thank you so much for all the inputs you gave to us, all the insightful information. You make it a holistic session, yet making it very detailed, very specific. You talked about the VUCA world, the systems approach thinking, and I believe all of us here understood everything. And still, if you guys have any questions, any comments, please go ahead, please unmute yourself. Feel free to unmute yourself, ask any questions, or you have to make any comments, feel free. See,
Yes,
that's the beauty of a great speaker, I believe.
no, either
Ma'am, you made us
everybody,
all,
eh,
yeah.
I think either they didn't understand or it was too simple. So I think it can be either
No,
way
that's the
around. But
beauty of yours, ma'am. You made us all understood everything so crystal clear that we don't have any questions. But again, I really genuinely thank you on behalf of the NISAG Foundation. And
thank you
I
so much.
request our lead of communication, Daisy Bhuyan, to give the vote of thanks for this session. Daisy, the stage is all yours now.
Thank you, always. So first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Shruti Sharma for her excellent presentation. I personally have understood all the topics you led us through during your presentation. I'm sure it's the same for all of the participants who are here in the session right now. And we deeply appreciate your time and presence in this session, and we look forward to collaborating with you in the future as well. And we hope we can stay in touch and learn more from you in the coming days. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'd also like to thank the participants who stayed till the end of this session. We appreciate your time as well, and we are coming up with more such sessions so as to loop into the conversation of circular economy. I request you all to kindly participate in our upcoming sessions as well, and let's learn and let's grow and let's change our thinking so that we can bring about a change in our community. Thank you so much, everyone. Over to you, always.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And with that, I will now like to end this session. And I request you all to please join us tomorrow for another session that will be focusing on the waste management. It is again, as ma'am already talked about, waste management is a very important aspect to cover in circular management. So for tomorrow, stay tuned and thank you so much. Thank you again, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day ahead.